Alright guys, we have our light notes are broken into three parts, so make sure you get to watch all three parts, but this is the first one, part one here, so this is where you're going to want to start. And when we jump into this, the first thing we need to talk about, well, like, what is light? And light is just a wave, and it's a wave that does not require a medium, so therefore we identify it as an electromagnetic wave. This allows the light wave to travel through a vacuum like space, and it's why we can get light from the sun, but we can't hear the sun burning because sound waves can't travel through a vacuum. So like sound waves are not going to be identified as electromagnetic. They need a medium, but light waves are electromagnetic. They can transfer without a medium. In fact, they actually transfer best without a medium. So light waves are kind of unique in the fact that they have two separate components that make up their waves. There's the electric component and there's a magnetic component. If you look at this diagram here, you can see this. So the wave is traveling in this direction, and then there is perpendicular to that, there's a magnetic field that vibrates, or a magnetic component that vibrates. So that would be transverse. And then there's an electric field that also vibrates. That would also be transverse. So really, you have the direction that the wave travels with a transverse magnetic component and a transverse electric component as well. Both of those together have to exist in order to have an electromagnetic wave. And this is why we call it electric, and magno, or magnetic, or the magnetic component. So it's an electromagnetic wave. And it's these two parts working together that allow this to be able to transfer without having a medium. So we kind of go, well, what happens when these magnetic and electric components vibrate? Well, the electric component, when that vibrates, that causes an electric field. So this allows electromagnetic waves to create an electric field. We call these types of waves radiation. So we think of radiation as being like always bad. Radiation is always bad, and really, this is kind of just like everything else. In small doses, it's not a bad thing. If you have too much of it, it certainly can be a bad thing. Now, some electromagnetic waves are more dangerous than others, depending on how much energy they can carry. Some are really not very dangerous at all, but we're constantly being kind of bombarded with all different types of electromagnetic waves. And we'll kind of use the words electromagnetic waves and light waves to be synonymous, but we need to understand that there's some electromagnetic waves that we can see, only a small portion, but they all there's this whole wide variety of electromagnetic waves that we can't see, but they really all are light. Just we don't necessarily have the sensory receptors in our eyes to be able to identify all of these different types of waves. So one thing that's often gets talked about is the speed of light, or light speed, and while it varies depending on the medium, we know all about how the type of medium that a wave is traveling through has a substantial impact on the speed of that wave. But if we're talking about going through a vacuum, the speed of light is just intensely fast, almost 300 million meters every second that passes by. So light can travel at just absolutely incredible speeds. And with this in mind, we can kind of address well, why do we see lightning before we hear thunder? We've talked about it, and that we know that light is faster than sound. But if we kind of put this into perspective, if you took kind of air in general, now air does not have a dramatic slowdown. So if we're looking at Earth's atmosphere, light is still going to travel pretty close to this speed. So if we looked at the speed of light versus the speed of sound traveling through our atmosphere, light could travel a distance of 300 million meters every second. So if we're looking at a 3 million meter distance being traveled, 3 million meters, light could complete that in just 0.01 seconds. Sound, on the other hand, would take almost 3 full hours to complete that same distance travel. So 0.01 seconds, almost 3 hours, is a pretty huge difference. I mean, absolutely huge difference between the speed of light and the speed of sound. So that's not to say that sound is slow, but comparatively speaking, it's certainly not fast. Light is much, much faster than sound is. Now, we said there's this whole range of different electromagnetic waves, and we call this the electromagnetic spectrum. And this electromagnetic spectrum is a listing, an organization of all of the different electromagnetic waves that we know of. And it can really be arranged based on the wavelength of the wave as well as the frequency. So we have long wavelengths on the left-hand side, or low frequencies on the left-hand side, with high frequencies and high wavelengths on the right-hand side. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of check things out and draw out your electromagnetic spectrum. Alright, so hopefully you've got that electromagnetic spectrum drawn in and labeled. And so at this point we want to talk about the different types of waves that make up the electromagnetic spectrum. And the first lowest energy waves are radio waves, and there's really two types. You may have heard of them, AM versus FM waves. And AM waves are actually the lower of these two energy types of radio waves. So AM waves actually have such a low amount of energy that if they reach the ionosphere within our atmosphere, they're going to reflect off that and bounce down. They don't have enough energy to get out of that. This allows us to send radio waves really long distances if we were using AM waves, where they can kind of bounce off the ionosphere and come back down. They bounce off the ground and go back up the ionosphere. So it allows them to travel really, really great distances, as opposed to FM radio waves, which have more energy, and that's probably why they come in more clear on your radio. But they also have enough energy that they will leave through the ionosphere, so they don't bounce, they can't travel as far. The next type of wave, in terms of going from the lowest frequency moving toward the highest frequency, the next set is a type of wave called a microwave. And these are the type of waves that are used in radar, if you're familiar with radar. So radar, we talked about sonar before, where it sends out, sonar sends out a sound wave, it hits off things, bounces back, and allows us to kind of tell the shape and size of other things in the environment. Well, radar kind of does the same thing, but instead of using sound waves, it uses microwaves, which is just, again, another type of electromagnetic wave. Now, after we get to that, we run into these types of waves that you're probably most familiar with hearing. The first is infrared, and so we talked about this prefix infra. It means less than or below. So this is infrared, means that it's below red. So it has a little less energy, a little lower frequency than the color red that we can see. We cannot see infrared, but we can sense it, and it is felt as heat. So when you're exposed to infrared radiation or infrared electromagnetic waves, you feel heat on your body, and this is one of the major types of waves emitted from our sun. Now, all of these types of waves are emitted from the sun, but really this infrared and then our next two categories, visible light and ultraviolet, these are the ones that come most significantly from our sun, more of these than anything else. So the light that we can see, we call this the visible light spectrum, or visible light. And really, we can break this further down into specific frequencies, some of which are lower energy and some of which are higher energy. So the way to kind of remember this is Roy G. Biv, where it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, which isn't listed here, and violet. And indigo is like this blue, purpley sort of color. So that is our specific order of colors in the visible light spectrum. And this is a very, 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 very small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. This, if you're looking at this diagram here, looks like it's a pretty large portion, but it's not. It's very, very tiny portion that we can see. Anything outside of this range, we just don't have the sensory receptors to be able to pick up. So if we're looking at these colors, red has the longest wavelength, the lowest frequency, and the least energy of the colors. Violet has the highest frequency, highest energy, and shortest wavelength of those colors. Now moving on to our next type of wave from the electromagnetic spectrum, we have ultraviolet waves. And ultraviolet waves are, there's some positives and some negatives to them. One of the big positives to them is that they can be used to sterilize medical equipment. They can kill bacteria, kill viruses. On the other hand, they also are the types of waves that are most likely responsible, or most responsible, for causing cancer. So again, good and bad, these are going to be a big part of what causes you to get sunburn and skin cancer. So we protect ourselves by using sunscreen. If you check out your bottles of sunscreen, they'll typically tell you that they protect against both UVA and UVB waves, which are the two types of ultraviolet waves with high and low frequency types. So after that, we can talk about X-rays, and X-rays are a type of electromagnetic wave that now we're really getting into waves that have quite a bit of energy. So much energy that these waves can pass right through your soft tissue, like your skin, your muscles, your organs. They don't have enough energy to get through your bones, however, though. So when these waves hit your bones, they reflect off that. And this is what allows us to use X-rays to get an image of what's going on inside of your body with your skeleton, with your bones. So we certainly use them as beneficial in the medical field, but if we were exposed to X-rays lots and lots and lots in large amounts all the time, that would be pretty dangerous because these are a high energy wave. Fortunately, when they're used in the medical field, it's small doses over just a really short period of time, and that's it. So, all right, the last type of wave that you need to be familiar with from the electromagnetic spectrum are the gamma waves, or gamma rays. And these are rays that have very, very, very high frequencies, a whole lot of energy, and exposure to these in even moderate amounts can cause cancer, but they can also be used to treat cancer. So what happens is that gamma rays will damage the membrane of cells, and that has potential to cause cancer if healthy cells are exposed to it. But if you have cancer cells that are exposed to the gamma radiation, then those cancerous cells will be damaged and destroyed in the same way that healthy cells would have been, so that we can use this to treat cancer. So gamma radiation therapy is a fairly common way in which cancer patients would be treated. Alright, so that is part one of the video for our light notes. So be sure to come back and check out part two as well, and then we'll have a third part coming up pretty soon as well.